Welcome to Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship Podcast with Ariel Shaw, MBA. We want to increase your bottom line and create generational wealth that lasts way beyond you. It's 2025 and we are in season 6. Wow, how exciting! This is the year of focus and continued expansion. Our 2025 media participants include Sylvia Dennis Ray of Sylvia the Advocate, Micah Johnson of Micah Johnson State Farm Insurance Agency, Shamika Davis of JTS Vacations LLC, and Laquita Brooks of the Motivational Maven. We are excited about your future. Thank you again for joining Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship Podcast with Ariel Shaw, founder and president of Southern Crescent Women in Business. Hi, and welcome to Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship. I am Ariel Shaw, founder and host of Southern Crescent Women in Business, as well as Southern Crescent Men in Business. And we are so excited to have our guest today, which is Mr. Sylvester Ford, and he will go and tell you a little bit about himself. But again, I think this may be the first time we've had a man on our podcast. So super excited about that. Sylvester, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Shaw, for having me here
tell
today.
Everybody who is Sylvester Ford?
Well, Sylvester Ford is a franchise and funding broker. As far as from a business perspective, I like to think there are many facets of everyone. But from a business perspective, I work with small businesses. I've worked with small businesses all my life since I got out of college in Bell South. I went immediately working with small businesses on a premise basis. Just go out on site, see, touch, and feel them, be able to shake their hand, look eyeball to eyeball, be able to be on site of the business. And that intrigued me. And it's been intriguing me my entire life, as far as working with small businesses and doing it from a hands-on perspective. And I just think that right now is a very interesting time for small businesses. There's a lot of changes that are going on in Washington and in the States that's going to force a lot of rethinking the operation.
Absolutely. So listen, we're going to dive into that in a moment. So what I want to make sure, so you say you work with small businesses, and I know you do things on the funding side and then you do things on the franchise side. So let's talk about the franchise first. So talk to us about what the landscape of franchising looks like today and why it would be a great opportunity, or would it be a great opportunity for individuals looking to get into entrepreneurship?
Right now, I think we're in the golden age of franchising because brand awareness is just so important. And the brands that many of these great concepts build stand behind you as an entrepreneur as you go into your communities. When people pass by McDonald's, they don't ask who the owner is. They don't ask what's on the menu. In most instances, they know what's there. Franchising offers a business owner the opportunity to be part of a big business, but being local in the method of operation. I think right now, franchising for people who are being downsized from some of the government jobs that are being removed. We're seeing a lot of large corporations beginning to downsize. Franchising would be a great opportunity for them. We see a lot of people who have been struggling with their own business, and to be able to convert them into a brand. If you are a great deli shop, but you're not getting the traction that you want, you might want to think about talking to one of our brands, such as Firehouse Subs and some of the other great sub sandwich shops that are out there, where you can convert you. Or if you have a great company and you think now is the time that I can really scale. There are a lot of people who, as I just said, have been downsized from the government, private sector, uh, who might want to take advantage of owning the brand and investing in the concept that I have right now. And they want to turn their franchise, their business into a franchise, because we also do franchise development. So I just think right now, when people are looking for safe harbors as customers, franchising provides that for the customer. And it's a safe harbor for people who never been an entrepreneur before in life, coming from the private sector or corporate America, to give them a business in the box with the recipe to be successful.
So, you hit on a couple things, and, and I'm actually so glad you actually went there today, because we were saying, hey, how do we help this sector? And that is the federal and private sector layoffs, more so federal side, and the increase in entrepreneurship that has happened across the country. We were seeing that it was upwards of almost 70% just because of these layoffs. And so individuals are looking to get into businesses. And so I think this is a really good time to have these kind of conversations, because, traditionally, when you saw more, ideally, women or even minorities getting into entrepreneurship, it was really one out of flexibility for and being able to control what their schedule looks like and not having to request time. And then the second was they weren't able to find a position, a job. So then they had to create their own. So it's so interesting to see that now individuals are now pushed with this where we are in the country into having to figure it out. And why franchising might be an option if they have the resources, because that barrier to get into franchising isn't cheap. Do you have any points or anything you want to say in regard to the cost of what things typically are when they decide to go this route?
Well, many franchise, there are two components to franchise, first of all. The franchise fee, which gives you rights of ownership. Say, for instance, Wendy's, you would have the right to have that logo with that big red logo said Wendy's with the girl logo, I think, in the right-hand corner, if I'm not mistaken. The ability to offer the menu that Wendy's has. You have all the secret sauces and any of their standard operating procedures and everything about how to operate a Wendy's. And that's what you get as far as the franchise fee. Also, you would get training, maybe some additional costs for training, just how many people do want to get trained. But for the most part, that's what the franchise fee goes. The second component of a franchise is the ownership, now that you own the ability to build things. Where are you going to put it? So you got to decide whether you want to buy a building or whether you're going to lease the building. In any way, you're going to have a building, and then also you're going to have to build it out. So your Wendy's looks just like any other Wendy's in the country. And then also you need all the same exact equipment that any other Wendy's has to have. So you got to have that. Then you got the dining area. You got to be able to furnish that along with the other fixtures and furniture fixtures and equipment. Making sure the uniforms all look the same for your employees. And we ask that you try to have 6 months worth of that. Well, with that, we call that the all-in one. And that varies in what type of franchise. I just gave an example of a high-end, also going to vary. You can get into the franchising space and with an SBA loan or with your retirement funds, home equity, or savings. On the low end, I would say about $100,000 on the low for to get in and be able to be self-sufficient. Whereas you can have about $50,000 franchise fee, and that will cover your cash injection for an SBA loan as long as you're around $350,000, and that's usually for something that has to have some kind of retail spot or some other type of office space to be in that has to look just like that. Look the same as all the others, but 50 to 100,000 is a minimum, and it can go all the way up to I've got a resort steakhouse that has several different variations. One can be in the biggest rooms with I think 9 million, and that can be in some of the nice resort areas. But then they also have a concept where you can do it about that will be it can be in Henry County, and you'll get most of the same components that you get at the resort area. But franchising covers not just restaurants. That's the misconception a lot of people have. There's over 200 to 250 different industries for franchising. All the way from automobile repair, senior care, daycares. I've got people looking at daycares. One of the great things, concept I like right now, categories of the boring businesses, things that people say are boring, that's not worthy of being in IG. Some of those companies have 30% margins. Many people who come into some of those operations might only have a high school degree. You know what? They're making more than people who spend $200,000-$300,000 on years.
So what are some of those boring, what you consider those boring, or what other people may consider those boring? What type of industries are those?
Well, the one I like right now is parking lot striping and maintenance. I've seen where some of those people, cars from the FDD, which is the franchise disclosure document, which is Bible, and coming out of the item 19, they're advertising that off of about $1.5 million to $1.5 million, they could make anywhere as far as somewhere in a gross profit around $250,000-$300,000.
Sorry, you're kind of going out. If you can,
let me get closer.
I'm sorry, you said 200 to 300,000. Is that a year?
Off of revenue of 1.5.
Okay, so that's a 1.5 valuation.
No, revenues, top line revenue.
Okay, so 1.5 revenue, and they're grossing or netting about 250,000.
250 to 300.
Okay, and that is for the year.
Yeah, that's after all bills are paid.
And that's for a parking lot.
Right, striping parking lots, filling in, the potholes. Maybe how you have cracks in the parking lot, and a lot of that work is done at night.
Right.
So you could conceivably.
So it's not owning a parking lot. You're talking about the individuals that come and actually put the parking lot spaces there and.
Right.
Oh wow. Okay.
And refurbishing those parking.
Right, resurfacing them. Okay.
Yeah, just refurbishing. I'm not talking about. We got one concept that does pavement, that will put the asphalt out and also do the stripes. Then I've got some that just do minor repair work, concentrating on stripes. And then there's apartment buildings, churches, warehouses, anywhere where people park. You can have that schools. Just think about it. Everywhere you drive a car to, and especially in urban areas. Now, some of the rural areas, like my hometown, you still might be drive on gravel, but you got parking spaces, and they're striped. And when doesn't it feel good when you pull up to a parking lot and the asphalt is fresh black with the white stripes, yellow stripes looking good. The handicap sticker is prominently displayed, so some people can't miss which school that they're not supposed to park at.
Well, listen, I mean, you don't have to convince us. I mean, this is called women wealth and entrepreneurship. So we love to hear of different avenues and different opportunities that maybe we have never even thought about. Because what I'm hearing you say, it may not be the most glamorous thing, and at the end of the day, you don't have to physically work in it if you hire your individuals to work there, but it is a good opportunity, and it is an opportunity that's under a franchise. So that's really good information. The other thing that you mentioned that I want to hit really quickly is converting to a franchise. So is it, and so if you have a business, we have individuals that may have one, two, three locations. At what point are you then having that conversation to say, hey, you know this business is ready to be franchised?
Well, I can do it off one location, and a lot of franchises only have one corporate home. And one of the keys is the standard operation. Have they figured out their standard operating procedure? And they don't have to be perfect because our team will come in and help. My back office team will come in and help on those kind of things. Or we look at what kind of revenues, because at the end of the day, that's what people are buying is how much can I expect to make? That's what's, and I mentioned the FDD. It's something called the IM19. All of the companies don't have it, but most do. But it says, talks about what the top tier people average, the average what they made and average revenues, the middle tier, and the lower end tier. If you even in the lower end tier, if someone buys your franchise that we have converted to a franchise, can they afford to pay you royalties about 6%, maybe 7% on royalties, and then either the national or local ad fee, which is usually 2 to 3%.
Well, give us some context. So give us some numbers. What do you consider lower end, and
It
what
just,
give
it
us
just
that.
depends. It just depends on what franchise concept it is, what type, and that's just how they break it down. For instance, if you have a barber shop, 300,000 or 400,000 might be a high end for that barber shop, maybe 500,000 as far as the total revenue. And then down the middle, they might make 350, and then the small ones might do 150. But then you got restaurants that are doing grossing a couple of $1 million a year. The margin is a lot smaller than that parking lot margin. But you have different tiers. So on those kind of things, I can't get out and say you're definitely going to make this or you're going to make that. That's why the franchise disclosure document is we can show you what the each individual franchisor has disclosed to us, but we still can't make the earnings claim. They have to go over that with you uh, based off each individual franchisor. So that's one of the things about it that you can't make any guarantees. We just could show, okay, this is what people in the system are doing, which each individual one. Now, that's going to depend. For instance, you have the baseball, the basketball, football team all start off with the same number of players. They all start off, the budgets are all about the same. TV revenue, stadiums about the same, but it's going to depend on number one, quality of the team that you put together, and especially what is the management team. That's why they be calling for the coach's head, and one coach comes in and turns the whole culture around, and before you know it, you got a championship team. Just like down in Texas, Sark turned that team around. Georgia many years ago was fortunate enough to hire uh, Kirby Smart, who turned that team. So also the management team that you put in, and that might be inclusive of yourself, or you might can be a very good judge of talent and just pick the right talent. Jerry Jones used to be great at that in his early years, but we don't know what's going on with him right now. So, and that's the dichotomy, just like what happens to those football teams. Those franchises, same with the quality of whoever you hire and bring in, has a lot to do in impacting the bottom line. Because we don't want you as a franchise owner. In most instances, if you buy a bakery, we don't want you in the bakery. We want you to think about how you're going to grow and scale
Let,
the
let me
business.
let me jump in here. So, that's an interesting thing you said. So, I don't think many entrepreneurs understand or really grasp the fact that this business, depending on, because I'm assuming we look at industry and then what's the top of what that industry can gross,
Mhm.
because before they decide to go into franchising. And I think that's a really great way to, it's a great one, retirement plan. Two,
Mhm.
it's a great opportunity for those who want their brand expanded without them physically having to do it. I think we have this misconception that, you have to have multiple locations, because I know that's, what we were thinking for some of, before we even have a conversation about franchising it. But you could have a really successful headquarter and then say, hey, I want to have this expanded, which I don't think I mean, maybe other entities have done this, but I don't think I ever saw that. We were having a conversation with an individual who has, a sandwich shop. And, he mentioned, hey, I'm already franchising and I have 30 locations across the US. And I'm like, what? But before they decided to do that, I know they have more than one location
Right.
here in Atlanta. So it's just that's interesting, because I have, you know, individuals within our organizations that are $1 million plus businesses. And I also want to say, I think the key is streamlining lining stuff and getting those operating procedures in place. And so many people want to hold on so tight to their business and their concept because they're afraid of other people taking it. But if you wrap it up in a franchising opportunity, then you protect it essentially,
Yeah,
correct?
you protect it because number one, they can't take your ideas and run with it. So they're going to be on. Most franchises are anywhere from 10 to 15 year agreement, and that you're married, so a divorce could be costly.
That's really good. Okay, well, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I wanna move to the next portion of this. Um, so as we talked about those who are, possibly wanting to convert to a franchise, I want to also talk about, what does it look like? Because I know this is something you've had your hand in as well. Um, for businesses that say, hey, I need to retire. My child doesn't want this business. Um, no one in the family wants the business. And I've been approached several times to sell the business. Um, so acquisition, and I want to talk about this because I feel like minorities aren't in that space a lot. I feel like I've seen, when we start talking about acquisitions, I also have a member, um, and they were at one point a part of an entity that was acquiring multiple CPA offices. And, for them, the of course the revenue had to be at a certain level. Um, but I'll tell you this, I didn't see a lot of um Black and Spanish individuals in that space, and I still don't. So I think we have this misconception that if somebody the children have to take the business. If the children, but that's not always the case. So if somebody, has worked in this business for a long time, and what does acquisitions look like? What does that selling look like? What do these businesses need to be looking at if they're interested in that particular option?
Well, first of all, can you show what kind of revenues that your business is running? We want to see, we want to see what kind of longevity for the employees. Because people, for instance, in our communities, we've seen like convenience stores were the first thing we saw in the African American, Hispanic communities that were being bought.
I'm sorry. You're going to have to speak up just a little.
I said, convenience stores was the first business that we start seeing on a high level being sold. When people walk in one day, it was this business walk in, there was a different group of entrepreneurs there. I mean, in most instances, they're from the Middle East or from South Asia. And people wonder, well, how did they get an opportunity to come to our community? They bought the business. And there are costs involved in buying business, just like in a franchise. They're not cheap, and sometimes they can be harder to finance because it's an existing business, and the bank's going to want, in a lot of instances, a little bit more down. Maybe sometimes, sometimes you can get away with 10%, but a lot of times they want 20% down. And then because also you got to rely on the numbers that the individual entrepreneur is providing, accurate numbers, that the folks have not been just padded or something. But in most instances, you're able to do great businesses that way. Also, they call it entrepreneurship through acquisition. I'm part of a group that we look at buying businesses on our own accord. We spent about a lot of money to take some classes, and we're thinking about teaching those classes and utilizing the same curriculum and syllabus that was used to teach us. But I think that trying to understand that there is a process also, and that there's some good businesses. And one thing you have to take into account when you're buying a business, especially if it has more than 2 or 3 employees, you're not just buying the business, but you're buying the culture that people have already created. And do you want to disrupt that culture if you cannot relate to the employees? They cannot relate to the customers. Where are those customers at? Is it a customer base that you can relate to? Might be a great business, but you can't relate to the customers. You can't relate to the employees. So that might not be what you want to be. So you need to help some professional, either a business broker, a consultant who can just guide you through the purchase. People who are called exit consultants. Our franchise offers exit consulting franchises that will teach people on how to be able to help other people do that. We even take some classes, and and none of this stuff is free. I think one of the big things that as we go through this new period, that we have to expect is that a lot of this information is available. There comes a cost, and you got to be prepared to pay. To go to those classes, and then making sure that you're going to very vetted, certified trainers, teachers who they might have. For instance, I work with Roland Frazier. Over 22,000 people have went through our program that he offers. I'm not plugging Roland, but he's fantastic. He's fantastic. They do offer a teaser class for 2 or 3 days. I can send you a link, and people can sign up using my link, and I think you might get a little bit of a discount. But the program's actually, I went through it about 2.5 years, and still have weekly classes that are provided even after the English.
So bottom line is there is a whole industry when you're looking at selling and or acquiring a business, from exit consultants to, just even understanding the valuation of your business
Right.
and even trying to at some point communicate what that culture is, which is a really good point, because you are not just typically buying a business with numbers, but if you're buying a business, you're buying, you're acquiring the people and the culture as well. So that's a really good point. um so as we phase out of that, what we're seeing, this is a very interesting time um in the United States and just the global economy, as a whole, because, we are in a global economy. So sometimes, we have this misconception that whatever we do doesn't affect anything else. That's not true. As we can see, you can look at the stock market, you can look and see how things are affected, you know, across the world by things that happen in the United States. So, for small businesses that are maybe trying to navigate the waters currently today, what type of advice do you have for them?
You know, I would say to businesses today, there are two big things that they have to try to avoid and to be looking at. Is trying to see how you can make your business tariff proof, or what are you selling?
I'm sorry, did you say make it tariff proof?
Tariff proof. And what I mean by that is to look at your inventories right now. Where, if you're a retailer, where's the majority of your products coming from? Where here in America can you source those products at a reasonable cost that would be a lower cost than dealing with the tariff? Secondly, I would say let's look at what aspects of your business can be hurt by a recession and what types of different products or services should you be offering in your business that you need to add, that even if a recession comes, you have products and services within your business that are recession proof, that people don't have to realize whether it's a recession or not. That's one of the reasons I love these foreign businesses, because most of them are businesses that people have to, whether you're talking about a franchise or existing business, that people have to utilize that service or that product regardless of whether there's recession or not. For instance, you're heating the air conditioning breaks down in the midst of the summer or winter, you still got to call that HVAC guy. You've got a pipe bust in the middle of the night, you still got to call that plumber. If your water basements get filled with water, you still got to call that company that does the recovery of and turning it back to like a renovation company. Come in there and get the water out of your basement, wherever where the pipe is bust, or after a fire or incident, to clean that out, gut that, and get it back, store it back to the way it was. Your ducts and stuff, if you got problems with asthma, with any type of lung issue or asthma or something of that nature, and you got all that dust in your ducts, you got to get those ducts clean. At some point, your landscaping, you can only, if you gotten older, you still don't, you can't push the lawnmower, but you still need somebody, a landscaper or a grass cutter, to come in, because especially if you're older, you don't want to walk through weeds, snakes, and whatever could be hiding in there.
Yeah. So we don't want to get into the idiot, but let me say this. So you're basically saying have something that people need.
Have something to buy.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't that really the basis, honestly, for entrepreneurship? For those that really want to be successful, is have it. You see a need and you need to provide it. That's because you'll always have money. So
well, that's true. That's true with that. For instance, as we go through the recession, even for, you look at some of the high-end products and stuff, say some of the med spas, and I'm glad to see that a lot of more affordable, medium price med spas are out there. We offer something like the Mind Spa. I hope I'm saying it correctly, and you see them all around the city now. Have a product or service that can appeal to the middle class, even if their budgets have been affected. That it might be still something they're splurging on, or something they still just aren't going to just say, "I'm not going to get," I'm not going to buy or purchase that service right now. You do have some high-end spas that, if they're located in a very middle class area, people won't be able to afford to come to those. But the ones that are priced right, I think, and have those kind of services, I think are very, very important and will survive regardless of the tariffs, regardless of a recession or not. But the other thing I want to emphasize, because that problems with the higher interest rates and things of that nature, I will tell everyone, get their credit right. Because as an entrepreneur, you want to make sure you can borrow money at reasonable rates when it's necessary. Whether it's to take advantage of the situation that's an emergency, or to take advantage of some opportunities. Because as we all know, during recessions, there are going to be opportunities where you acquire companies to add to what you're doing, because some people who can't go out and get that credit, don't have the expertise and advantage like you do with the company, are going to be selling, or whether it's the entire company or a piece of it. There are going to be companies going out of business, so there's opportunities for you to grab, supplies, equipment, things that they have that you might need. Now you can get it, maybe instead of paying market rates 10 to 20% on the dollar.
You mentioned recession quite a bit, so I'm a little nervous about that. So, we're technically not in a recession, but you are anticipating one. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, Scott Bennett, the new Treasury Secretary, said it's possible that we could have one. We've seen, I listened to whether it was Fox Business or CNBC, Bloomberg. There, different types of business have different opinions. If the tariffs continue at the rate that they initially were 2-3 weeks ago, when a big announcement was made about Liberation Day, and saw what happened in the markets, everybody was saying it was no way, if things maintained at that level, that we would not have someone at some point. Now, we are going to have the budget has been released as of, I think, earlier in this week. There are going to be a tremendous number of cuts in a lot of ways. I don't, on the high end, they won't have a recession, but they're going to give a huge tax break. But, how is it going to affect the small businesses and the individuals who drive this economy? Because if their costs go up, whether it's on medical costs go up, if their costs on a lot of other services go up because the government is not subsidizing those services anymore, or the vendors and suppliers that were providing some of those services, who were your customers, are not there anymore. That's going to impact a lot of people. So they're going to, for some people, and it could be a recession for some, and then some won't even feel it or notice it. But I think with all those cuts that are about to take place, there are going to be winners and losers.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is always going to be the case. How do those that are listening and I don't want to say this the wrong way because I want to be sensitive to where we are, but um would you, yeah, I mean, I guess you've kind of already touched on a lot of those things, but I really just am trying to make sure, you know, and I don't know if maybe you can even go into some industries, but how do you become that a part of the sector that isn't hit as bad? Um, so, um, are we thinking different types of investment? Are we thinking, um, you know, moving some real estate? What additional things can we really do to safeguard? Um, and I mean, you mentioned credit, which I think is a very key thing. Um, and I think we kind of put ourselves in this little box though, um, because how many of us are doing business outside of this country? Is this something that we need to also look at? I mean, I know we're talking about tariffs, but I got an invitation to some individuals that came over from the continent of Africa just a few days ago about business. What does it really look like? Because we're not limited, honestly, to just our borders. We're not limited to um, even banking within our borders. Can we really look at some really extreme, and when I say extreme, I mean just when, and it doesn't extreme not in a bad way, but extreme ways of maybe we need to really do a deep dive and say this isn't something we've traditionally done, but maybe we need to start looking again. I mean, I'm seeing people getting dual citizenships and literally starting things differently, while still maintaining what they may have in America. But what and I mean, I'm hoping you're hearing me, but what additional things can we really start to look at besides just the normal, hey, we may end up we may end up in, because I don't feel like this is ordinary time. I feel like things that traditionally haven't been, nobody really messed with Social Security previously. There were talks, but you really didn't. Nothing was really done. Um, so I think we need to be as just as extreme in how we may be looking at what the alternatives are. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been studying some things and just looking at all the different types of thought processes around the world. And I have been looking at South Africa and what the people there are doing in order to allow for their community, which is about 90%, pretty large Black community. They call it radical economic transformation, and it's not really radical, but it is rethinking about not requiring government to be the people who supply all their needs, not allowing for outside communities to supply their needs, but to begin to, buy. They're buying, like for instance, they buy the make sure they own the dry cleaning, make sure they own all the needs of production and services within their own community. A lot of communities, it's not said, but there are many from a economic perspective. There are a lot of closed communities there. And I don't want to really just get in here, but there are a lot of closed communities where African American community is not able to penetrate as far as in, they don't shop in our stores, they don't shop in our restaurants, they don't shop at any, I don't go to any of our professionals. Maybe we might do the landscape, maybe. an opportunity, but there are a lot. So we have to look at what communities need, what we have to bring here in America, because when you look at it from the outside world, our community is supposed to be the talented African American, I mean African community around the world, or descendants of Africa around the world. So there are opportunities. There are groups out there that are more knowledgeable on how to utilize those opportunities than I am. But yes, there that is a big process to it. You know, from a franchise standpoint, yes, we are looking to many of our franchises are looking to expand internationally. Does it, I haven't gotten into what are they looking at the country that is more receptive to us than others, certainly on the Africa's company that Nigeria is, some of the others who can support some of the American culture type opportunities for the and that we have to offer. We probably would be the purveyors and introducers of those opportunities to them. But yes, that is a separate opportunity and niche that we should be looking at. Yes.
I completely agree. Yeah, so I just wanted to button up this conversation with sometimes, we really put ourselves in a box. Even the entrepreneurs that think they're not in a box, because I really think in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to it's two different kinds of entrepreneurs. You have ones that are like you had to create your own job, and it's because you had to figure out a way to earn income. That's a different kind of entrepreneur. Then you have entrepreneurs that are crazy enough to say, I have an idea that's so good that I'm willing to bet on myself. Um, both entrepreneurs, but the motivation is different.
That,
Um,
that's correct. Now,
and so, I just want to make sure that because when we talk, and this is a global podcast, so, we made it top 25 globally, which is lovely, which means people in different countries can hear us. And I think um it's something to say, because we really do sometimes, again, just even we get into Atlanta does this, Atlanta does that, but we're way bigger than just what we can see right now in front of us. So I just want to make sure, and even when you look at just how um our counterparts have done things, they're working with individuals in the UAE and all parts of the world. So I just want to make sure we're not limiting ourselves to, even when you're looking at banks, what other banks can you do business with that maybe are not in the United States of America? I want us to start looking bigger, because, the world is a really big place.
well, you hit on some capital. Capital is the word that you're going, and there's money that has been coming to America. Now, how much of it goes down to the small business? Some does, but when we start getting into some of the higher end opportunities, multi-million dollar opportunities, there's a chance for direct foreign investment in communities and certain businesses that are attractive to certain companies, countries. They have a lot of countries have what they call sovereign wealth funds, which they utilize for investment purposes. So I don't, the small business can't tap those kind of funds directly, but then there are certain
but
what they
but you maybe can as an individual. I'm
well,
telling you, when I tell you, you know, so of course we have individuals that do travel within our organization, and so I was like, hey, what's I want to check the temperature of what's happening in your industry. Um, and of course, you know on her industry, she was like, well, we have less people coming in and more people going out of the country. And I'm like, yeah. So I think there's something to be said about that. I just wanted to make sure as we talk to entrepreneurs, I'll tell you this, myself as an entrepreneur, I'm always looking for another challenge. I'm always looking not to get bored, because I'm like, gosh, I want something exciting. I want something new. You always want to keep it fresh. So, you're always wanting to elevate, to level up, to not just have things so mundane or, because at some point when you're in business for a while and you've been doing a certain thing for a while, it literally just becomes like, okay, we've done this process is this, and you know how to do it with your eyes closed. But for typical entrepreneurs, that's not enough. That's not enough. It's like, well, hell, I could get a job, but I want something else. I want something more exciting. I want something more. I want the fresh perspective. And so I'm all about that. I'm all about that. And yes, do whatever you need to do to operate what you need and how, this American system requires. But I also think, we just got to start thinking a little differently. Beyond the borders.
And we have to ask what's next. And then also, we have to look at what the opportunity internationally. We've got here, just here within the country. Yeah. When you're based in Atlanta as a private sector business person, we're seeing as, a group of entrepreneurs that are somewhat different from a lot of the other entrepreneurs as a group, as a whole, around the country. And it's a lot of places around the country, right here in America, that needs our expertise, that needs our knowledge, that needs they need our help. Because it's a lot that we bring to the table. I was just surprised when I was in Washington and part of the franchise expo that the Washington community is not as private sector driven as the Atlanta community. And it's a lot of things that I think there's a lot of opportunities on the small business team that there could be some synergies there, and as far as a lot of partnership that could be in it. And then you start looking at it probably around the country. But, as we close, one of the things I want to also reiterate, let's not sleep on rural America. And because if we look at, especially in the Southeast, where the great migration from the South to the North took place, there's still a tremendous number of African American communities that when we go there, we always say, Lord, there must still back in stone. Well, I think it's our responsibility as African American entrepreneurs and other entrepreneurs who also have the affinity to help those communities, to bring them out of being still in the 1930s. So the needs that they have, whether it's infrastructure, as far as finding ways in which to help them work with the government to get what they need in terms of some of the plumbing issues. I just reading something on television, what's just going on in Birmingham, outside of Birmingham, about the plumbing and the sewage that's coming out around. We got enough engineers, we got enough bankers, and I think they've got an African American politician to help those kind of communities come out of the poverty that they're in. It's not glamorous work, but it's stuff that's fulfilling and very much needed. And we have the skill set to do that. So I think it's a time that we look within. If we're talking about the African American community, we're talking about some of the other communities where we value the help that they want to help in this area. because we have been on the forefront of the civil rights movement. It just allowed for women to have a lot of the opportunities that they have to come to this country. And that's what we think we need some help at in trying to help uplift some of the people who've been left behind right here in America, and not asking the government for a handout. But I mean, utilizing the tools that the government is giving for some of these areas, but also helping the politicians navigate that and make it reality from the school.
All right. Well, thank you, Sylvester, for joining Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship today. How do they find you?
I'm Sylvester Ford, Black Label Franchise for Alternative Finance and Business Strategies. My number is 678-896-6476. Our website, Black Label Franchise, is just at www.blacklabelfranchise.com. And then for those who are looking for funding when the bank says no, that's exactly what our website says, as far as www.whenbanksayno.biz, whenbanksayno.biz, or blacklabelfranchise.com. And also you can look me up on LinkedIn, Sylvester Ford MBA on LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you, Sylvester. It has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you all for joining another episode of Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship with Ariel Shaw. Have an Thank you. Have an amazing day.
All right.
This has been another episode of Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I am Ariel Shaw, your host of Women, Wealth, and Entrepreneurship. And again, our media participants include Sylvia Dennis Ray of Sylvia, the Advocate, Micah Johnson of the Micah Johnson State Farm Agency, Shamika Davis of JTS Vacations LLC, and Laquita Brooks of The Motivational Maven. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you had an amazing experience.